your job description is two things as a manager. Number one is to deliver an aligned result. Now, that doesn't sound very human. Aligned is a word doing a ton of work. If I deliver some result that doesn't help the company, that's pointless, right? So aligned result. But second is to enable the success of the people on your team.
All right, this is Patrick Ewers here. I'm the founder and CEO of Mindmaven. We're an executive coaching firm that helps people achieve their fullest potential by focusing on relationships. And one of the ways we achieve that is by changing the way you work with resources very similar to an EA. And through that process, we can free up over 12 hours a week of time. And then, of course, we want you to invest that time into relationships. And so today I'm super excited to have Russ Laraway with us. Russ is basically the CEO of, is it Overland Consulting?
Yeah, when they win, you win. It's, CEO of When They Win, You Win.
I was going to get there. He's also the author of this amazing book. And when I tell you guys this title, you will know why he's here with us today, because I don't think there is a more powerful human first title of a book than his. His book is called When They Win, You Win. And I'm super thrilled to have you here on board. But one thing that I did want to tell everybody listening in today is he's not just the author of this book. He has also a fascinating background. He started off as being a commander in the U.S. Marine Corps, then basically made a big splash at Google and became one of their most successful managers over there. And has basically guided his entire life by principles of focusing on the people around him. And so I think we're going to have a really intriguing session today. And with that in mind, Russ, usually I start off asking questions like, hey, what is human first for you, and so on and so forth. But I think we can skip this and basically just go and say, well, you picked an interesting title for the book that is called When They Win, You Win, which in itself is already human first by definition. And so I just want you to talk to us about that.
Yeah, why did I write that book, huh? Yeah, I think there's a couple of provable realities. I think, first, I just believe, this isn't necessarily something provable, I just believe people deserve to be led well. Mm-hmm. Spend a lot of time at work. It means a ton to us. You think about like Maslow's hierarchy of needs and how much of that is served by our jobs and our careers, and many of us want to achieve. There's a ton wrapped up in that. And boy, whether or not you get the things you want, your manager has a really big role in that. And so I think people deserve to be led well. What's provable, though, is that people aren't really being led well. And despite the mountains of content aimed at helping managers be better, the truth is they're not leading better. And there's reasons for that. And, the number one reason is there's too much stuff. Number two is it does not hang together. And third is, none of the stuff out there telling you how to be a better manager is held to any sort of measurable account. And so I had this realization that the world just doesn't need another person's opinion about what it takes to be a good manager. We got enough of that, and it doesn't work. It's susceptible to bias. It's not necessarily always pragmatic. There's a million reasons why it doesn't work. Mm-hmm. Never mind a manager trying to get better opts in as a function of their own bias. I'm going to latch onto that thing because I'm already good at it. I'm going to latch onto that thing because it sounds like something I've heard before. Versus what my team at Qualtrics and I did was we studied a set of behaviors, leadership behaviors, that when practiced regularly, measurably and predictably leads to more engaged employees and better business outcomes. Now that sounds maybe not exactly like the most human sentence you've ever heard, but the reality under the surface, Patrick, is like the only thing everybody wants at work is to be successful. It's the only thing we all have in common. Actually, we're not all there to make friends. We're not all there to date. We're not all there to have a good time. We're not all there to hit the happy hours, whatever these things we do. But there is one thing that we all have in common. It's that we want to be successful. And it turns out that the manager, by a mile, is the direct supervisor, is the person who is most likely to create or destroy the circumstances under which people will either do their best work and be totally psyched while doing it, or they won't. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I think I can serve humanity a little bit more by focusing on fixing managers, at scale. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, it makes a ton of sense. Why would you say is that actually then doing that, which had a certain analytical approach to it, is actually a very human way of going about it?
Yeah, it's interesting. So the secret is in the actual behaviors that I prescribe. So the way I don't mean to turn this into a pitch about the book, but it's useful
Oh,
context.
please do so.
Given your question, it's useful context. So the book starts out. Part one is really sort of the why and the how, the methodology of how we arrived at some set of leadership behaviors that measurably and predictably lead to more engaged employees. Engagement matters a ton, and better business outcomes. Massive engagement problem in the U.S. By the way, twice as bad globally, and manager effectiveness explains 70% of employee engagement. Employee engagement predicts results in a business. So you get underneath first, what are the behaviors that a manager exhibits that lead to these two things, engagement and results? Well, it turns out those behaviors tend to be extremely human in nature. The first set of behaviors, so the book's organized, here's why and how. Then it's bucket of behaviors, 1, direction. Bucket of behaviors, 2, coaching. And bucket of behaviors, 3, career. All of which are underpinned by something that I call it's the universal manager job description. I don't care if you're Patrick. I don't care if you're Sundar leading Alphabet or Google, and I don't care if you're Julianne leading the frontline sandwich shop makers at Jersey Mike's. Like, I don't care who you are. Your job description is 2 things as a manager. Number 1 is to deliver an aligned result. Now, that doesn't sound very human. Aligned is a word doing a ton of work. If I deliver some result that doesn't help the company, that's pointless, right? So aligned result. But second is to enable the success of the people on your team. That's it. You do those 2 things, you're going to be a really successful manager. And success I divide into 2 parts.
Well, let me jump in here for a moment.
Yeah, go ahead.
You keep on saying that it doesn't sound very human, but to me it is like one of the most human things one can say, because if it's true that most people go to work because they want success, right, in some form or the other, then helping them be more successful is exactly the human first approach that you're taking, right?
Totally agree, yeah. The deliver aligned result part was what I meant. Doesn't sound
Right.
that human, yeah.
Oh, but it's that is even a tool of allowing success to happen, is what you're saying.
Correct. Correct. It's almost impossible for someone to be successful if we haven't clarified what exactly is expected of them.
Yes, it is impossible, right?
And most managers, this is the shocking reality. Most managers are not even sure what they expect, let alone can turn around and articulate to someone what they expect, let alone have a way to measure it. And so by being a freewheeling, chill bro, chill cis manager who's easy expect, you're setting people up to fail. You're setting people up not to succeed. It's the only thing they really want, and you're taking that away from them before you even get started. And so that's that's a very insightful point that I usually have to make. So thanks for making it for me. Is that work actually is it's foundational work. So direction, coaching, career, deliver an aligned result, direction. Coaching and career enable the success of the people on your team. Success being short term, being better at your job, getting better results now, coaching. Long term, you as a human being beyond these 4 walls, how can I help figure out what you want to be, and then how can we take small steps right now to help you achieve that? So I'm helping you be successful over the long term. So that's 2 kinds of success I meant. And so when you kind of break it down like that, direction, coaching, career overlaid on top of that manager job description, boy, it's as human. I can't think of something more human-centric than laying it out like that.
That's exactly true. And I think the one thing that's hidden in this that maybe most people don't realize is you might be very tough, you might be very specific and very, very structured in your direction, right? Giving, and that doesn't, but when you do it, you're actually giving people liberty. You're giving people the freedom to chase that, and the security that if they do the things that lead to the results that are expected, that the outcome, the reactions that you're getting are the ones that you would then anticipate. And right, and yet I assume that is something that is not as common as one would wish for.
Yeah, it's funny. You're spot on. The structure and the rigor. I have to be real careful actually when I talk about the book. On the one hand, I don't want to be another talking head opinion. So it's really important for me to convey the structure and rigor. On the other hand, you have to be real careful to convey to people this is not some research paper. It's loaded with stories and anecdotes and how-to and practical tips. I tried to write it sometimes in a funny way. My editor made me take a bunch of that out. But it's this balance between the two. And it is true. The rigor, basically, I think for me, I think managers are being asked to focus on too many things that just literally don't matter. Just because the CEO went to some cool, situational leadership seminar, and then CEO, for CEOs especially, what we do from a leadership perspective has got a very flavor of the month feel to it. And you're a manager in a company for 3-4 years, and the CEO or some PhD who got their PhD in like leadership development, if they keep bringing new things, that's exciting and novel and fun. But how much of it really matters? How much of it is actually contributing to you being more successful manager, which is only defined by whether you're creating the circumstances under which your people can be successful. When they win, you win. Wow. So I think that's the value of the rigor, is it brings things down to whether you like it or not. Sometimes you'll like it, sometimes you won't. These are the things you got to do over and over and over that will get what we all want, which is happy employees getting better results.
That's right. Okay. So we talked a lot about direction. You said coaching and career. Under the coaching, I think your book talks quite a bit about this concept of giving praise. And this is actually something I want you to talk to about, because a lot of people struggle with it because they revolt against it, saying, I don't want to praise people just for the point of praising people, because somebody said one should praise folks. Yeah. And I think you have some interesting antidotes on that.
Yeah, well, that's a good instinct. But then to reach the conclusion, no praise is a bad outcome. But the instinct, just praise because someone told me to, is that would be ineffective as accurate. Right. So let's break it down. First of all, I call it continue coaching. The other word that gets used a lot is the opposite one, which is criticism, which I call improvement coaching. I actually find this language a little more accessible. Remember, we're coaching, whether it's continue or improve, to help people be more successful. And so, I talk about a 5-to-1. Now, where did I get 5-to-1? I didn't make that up. I got that from the Positive Coaching Alliance. Positive Coaching Alliance is a nonprofit, global nonprofit that works at professional, college, high school, youth levels. And I got forced to go to a seminar because I was a little league coach. And I didn't want to spend my Saturday this way. I'm just generally skeptical in seminars, but it turned out we hit the lot. Our facilitator was great. The content was great. And I was really happy I did that. And so they said 5-to-1 praise criticism, or as I would say, 5-to-1 continue to improve. And so the first thing I did was, as the head coach of the team, I coached with a buddy who we'd coached a number of times together, similar philosophy. Winning matters, but development first. Kids want to win. How are you evaluating whether you've developed them well if we're not looking at what we're doing on the field? I don't think this everybody gets a trophy stuff is useful to anybody. And so, but development was the primary goal. So what I did was I started something I called the book. Not clever. It was literally a lab notebook where all I did was write down what the kids did well. So you showed up on time to practice, I wrote your name down. You counted loudly during stretching, I wrote your name down. And then this went all the way through to properly fielding a ground ball. Center the ball in your stance, get your glove in the dirt, throwing hand over top of the ball, direct line, your glove to your shoulder, back foot, front foot, fire to first. And so I would write down, and then, lull in energy mid-practice or something, we'd bring the kids in, I'd hold the book up like Lion King and sing, I'd literally sing the Lion King, and then I'd read from the book. I'd get stink-eye because my son wasn't counting loudly during stretching, and I didn't say his name. And so anyway, a lot of people think, they hear that, and they're like, oh, of course, that works on kids. Yes. Kids love to be praised. Well, hold on a minute. I'm going to tell you two things why that's a mistake to reach that conclusion. One is 5-to-1 that Positive Coaching Alliance offers. Where did they get it? Well, they got it from John Gottman, who's a guy who wrote, one book that he wrote is 7 Principles for a Successful Marriage. I don't know any kids in 2024 getting married, so I assume that book is aimed at adults. 5-to-1 praise criticism is one of 7 principles that lead to a successful marriage. But let's set that aside. We're not married to the people we work with. We're not married to our teams. I don't even think that's a good metaphor. What it forced Drew and I to do, Patrick, and this is the key, is it forced us to be able to articulate our team standards clearly, crisply, repeatedly, because you're going to confuse the kids. If it's a different standard for fielding a ground ball every time, the kids are going to be confused. They'll never get it right.
Right.
And to communicate those standards, we had to know them. And we didn't know them at first. We had to be able to create the standard and then say it the same way over and over to the point where the kids could, And that is very useful in the workplace, that idea. And so the standard for good praise or good continued coaching isn't good job. That's not it. That's terrible. It's specific and sincere relative to your standards. And if you do that, now that's valuable because now people are hearing directly from you what's working and what they should repeat. So that's the idea of 5 to 1.
Give me an example that is for the adults. Like you had me right away. I actually find it very rarely are there differences between kids. It's very rare in my life experience that things that work for kids won't work for adults. Like, for example, structure. Anybody who's a parent will see that the kids is doing better if you give them structure. I don't think that goes away just because we grow up. But I still would love to, it's easier to translate it if you have something that is an example, maybe.
Yeah, so first of all, the kinds of things you can give praise or criticism on in the workplace or continue or improve are just 2 things. Like, let's just to simplify. It's a little oversimplified. Someone's work product, like the analysis, the customer service ticket, the way they ran the meeting, the presentation they gave, the meeting they ran, things like that. That's the work. And then there's the behaviors that you expect, which are like your core values. Usually your core values are the best place to find the behavioral standards in an organization. Okay, so you're only going to give praise or criticism one of those 2 things. A good structure then, the example I'll give you, I'm going to put into SBI format. It's situation, behavior, impact, which comes from Center for Creative Leadership, like a 100-year-old, brilliant nonprofit, hundreds of thousands, like 100,000 customers, all this stuff. The other one is SWI, situation, work, impact. I'm going to skip that one for now. And so I'm going to put my continue coaching in an SBI format. So here's what it might sound like. Patrick, in our team meeting last week, so that's the situation. That's it. Doesn't have to be fancy. That's the situation. When you challenged Steve's analysis of, the customer service issues, that's the behavior. I know it wasn't easy, but I really appreciate it because when you do that, you help Steve sharpen his analysis, you help us arrive at better conclusions, and you help us fulfill our value of helping everyone on the team around you to be more successful. Thank you. So that wasn't. I didn't put a rocket into space with that, right? Efficient situation, efficient behavior, a little bit more on the impact, because I'm trying to explain to you why. Because that was not comfortable for you to do. It was embedded in my behavioral treatment, and I want you to keep doing that. You did it, ostensibly you did it politely. Ostensibly you did it, like a friend. You wouldn't try to embarrass them. There's this, someone might say, "Isn't that public criticism?" It's not really. Like we're all trying to get to a good answer together, and the analysis is coming up short. Someone's got to help Steve see that, and Steve's better off. We're better off. You're better off, and so that's the idea there. And that's a case where I praised you for your behavior, and I described exactly where and when, what was the behavior, and why it mattered.
I think another pragmatic element is that a lot of folks think praise has to be about something big. And your example is sort of like that was a day-to-day thing, right? And so invite, I assume you would agree it is okay to invite people to praise on the tiniest things you could see, right? Even if it's somebody nodding a lot in a meeting, right? You could praise that because you think it is along the lines of your values and therefore behavior that should be reinforced.
Yes. I think it's important to get a durable, consistent set of standards. So I'd be, one evolutionary path of what you just said is it's limitless praise for all kinds of things that aren't articulated standards. I don't think you mean that, but some people could hear that. I want to move away from that a bit and toward what are our durable standards that we can praise for. But your concept is spot on. Two big mistakes people make with this idea of praise, or as I call it, continue coaching. One is it's got to be big. And 2 is the worst leadership instinct that exists is I'm going to withhold it because it'll mean more when I give it. Wrong. Yeah. Just wrong. And I don't deal in right and wrong. I deal in the whole world is gray. Physics doesn't even have one theory. They have 2 competing theories. Physical laws of the universe.
Yes.
Like you're going to tell me there's right and wrong in the work. I don't believe you, but this is wrong. Withholding praise because it'll mean more later is a bad practice as a manager, and yet one of the most common poor instincts that managers have.
All right. Well, I think we're slightly out of time here. Anything you want to point people towards that want to read more about you and your work and so forth?
Well, thanks. I have a website, whentheywinyouvin.com. Maybe the best thing about that is I tend to put my podcast appearances on there on the /media. /tools. I have some free tools people could use if they like for career, the part 4 of my book, and also, really, that's probably the most important one. I also have like a leadership hiring rubric too. on there. But probably better is just LinkedIn. Just find me on LinkedIn. There's only a couple Russ Laraways. I'm the only one, I think, with a picture. And if there's more than a picture, I'm the only bald one. So I'm really easy to find there. I write articles and try to just be helpful in general. And that's probably a good place for folks to connect.
Well, the boldness is something you and I have in common, only that I am hiding it under my little cappy here. So there you go. Well, thank you for being here. This was really awesome. And then for everybody who's listening, go pick up that book. You can find it on Amazon. As we already said, it's called When They Win, You Win. I think it's a masterclass in being a human-first leader.
Awesome. Thanks.